Tim Waltz, Harris's new running mate or vice presidential pick for the US elections coming up, has probably delivered one of, if not the best phrases, probably in political history. And all he had to use was just one word, really, to describe the current Republican Party. Aren't they just a bit weird? And the Republicans melted down to such a point that this has now become quite a big fixation point on them. It has become a massive point of inflection on them, massively so, that they can't even escape from. And not only that, I would not be surprised if very soon, maybe it'll be Keir Starmer, maybe it'll be Angela Rayner. After all, a lot of the conservative press went after her when she went to this, rave, and then focused on her on this apparently demeaning her office, and at least that's what Nadine Dorris would say. And I would have to say around, and I would hope maybe Angela Rayner turns around, or maybe it's another Labour MP who describes another conservative fixation as weird in the future, and maybe then that now becomes synonymous with the Conservatives, something else that starts latching onto them, that the British public also goes, well, actually, yeah, that is a bit weird that they fixate on all this stuff so much. So we'll see. But as I've kept on saying, the Conservative Party is in a massive, massive mess at the moment. And honestly, maybe we'll do this another time, but a big Badnock backer has recently flipped to join Jerrick. So, as I've been for the past couple of weeks saying, this is Kimmy Badnock's race to win. She gets to the final two, that is. I'm asking the question now, will she actually make it to the final two? I don't know. There seems to be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And of course, this is the type of stuff that doesn't get talked about until maybe after the case. But as always, this is, backroom dealings, horse trading, because it's all to do with MPs at the moment in that particular race. But today I want to talk about something that the Conservatives really have to do. And we've talked about this briefly before, but whenever an opposition party loses, or loses quite in a significant way, the membership of the party very often ends up electing someone who does not really appeal to the broader electorate, and instead really only appeals to the membership. And remember, at this moment in time, because we don't really know, because the Conservatives won't come out and say it, but we know their membership has vastly dropped off. And we don't know how small it really is. To the point we've briefly touched on about this. We've seen some conservative commentators say we're lacking a big cash flow loss because we've lost so much, of the membership, of the donors. This is going to be a big problem that the next leader is going to have to sort out. Now, will they be able to effectively do that? Who knows? Time will tell. But something interestingly came up very recently, and this seems to be once again trying to change the history of the Conservative Party. But it goes into this whole, talk of the wider, broader electorate and sort of what they wanted. And there's two very interesting things that this guy, and he's a local Conservative campaigner, brings up. And he talks about, we've got to pick someone who is not just important to the party, but is to the wider electorate. And we've got to sort of focus on that. But they're not going to pick, because trust me, none of the people that they are even in this race are really going to be acceptable to the wider electorate. And then he brings up this fact about how political parties win on being a broad church and how they can deliver on this stuff. And then he brings up the quote, many good examples. And the two he picks out of being a broad church examples that the Conservative Party managed to sort of succeed on were legalizing gay marriage to delivering a referendum on EU membership. And here's the thing, both these things did not end up being delivered by the broad church of, at that time, the Conservative Party. Gay marriage, if you want to see what the Conservative stance had always been on it, go and watch the clash between Rory Stewart and David Davis on the rest of politics, because what David Davis says about gay marriage and what you see in how Rory Stewart is coming across is the difference. And the reason why, of course, as Rory Stewart explains, you look at what the way that public opinion was going, and more MPs came around to the fact that actually opposing this and legalizing it was as the far better, politically better move for them. That's what they ended up being, and some really did believe that that was something that they should be really sort of worth fighting for as well. So not all of them were, should we say, political opportunists, but a lot of them gave it up begrudgingly. And like Davis, still very much someone who was a part of that party, still very, very much opposed. But that was what used to be the order of the day, and that wasn't changed by it being a broad church. That was based on it being that the UK was changing. The attitudes to this were fundamentally changing, and the Conservative Party really realized it could not maintain its opposition against that. And even Cameron rightly pointed out and went on that. And then, of course, you have the referendum on EU membership, which is, if anything, doesn't really, once again, show that the Conservatives were a broad church on the issue of EU membership. You look at the polls from 2014, 2015, etc., really until the referendum actually got announced, this wasn't a concern for the vast majority of the British public. Like, this was not a major concern to them. As far as they were concerned, Europe was a thing that they were part of that they didn't really care too much about. They weren't concerned about it. Even in the Conservative Party, this was always considered to be a very fringe issue. The Euroscepticism had been an issue that even David Cameron had said, we need to stop talking about Europe so much. And to use the phrase bluntly, maybe you should have used it at a time, it makes us a bit weird. Who knows? Maybe that could have changed things. But why did the EU referendum happen? Well, we know why it happened. It was this going into coalition with the Lib Dems and those 13, rebel MPs who constantly harried Cameron and the rest of the party, saying, if you do not do this, we will lose to UKIP. And they used that recent European election as what would happen. Like, we're going to lose all these MPs if we do not become this, if we do not do this. If not, well, if you don't deliver this, then we'll walk across the party and we'll become, UKIP MPs. We'll do the Douglas Carswell thing. And of course, Cameron, I would still believe if he had really a spine, he should have called their bluff on it. I still believe to this day he should have just called their bluff, and I don't think we would have had a referendum on Europe at all. It just wasn't something anyone at the time really honestly wanted, until Cameron felt that he had to maybe give it in, and it was a referendum he felt that he could win. following on from, the Scottish independence referendum at the time that given him more confidence to be able to do one, um, etc., etc. Rest is history. Not a really good example of a broad church, shall we say, affecting it. If anything, that is an example really of a small part of the membership driving something which the wider part of the membership really didn't want to do, but ended up going along with it. And so did too the rest of the British public, unfortunately. That this idea of a referendum was a good idea. And of course, here we are. But like I say, as always, let me know what you think down below. But I am very, very much of opinion that the Conservative Party is going to be a mess for a long, long time to come. You've got someone writing in I think it was the Sunday Times today, that because they are so obsessed with reform, they're gonna end up having their lunch eaten by the Liberal Democrats, which I've brought up I don't know how many times, because it wasn't really reform they lost to, it was the Lib Dems. Ultimately, they lost more seats to the Lib Dems than they did to reform. Yet for some reason they are obsessed with reform, partly because they are obsessed with the fact that this splits their vote on the right wing of the party, not really realizing that they lost a lot of other votes to other parties too, but for some reason it's reform that they need to focus on. Once again, bit weird. And of course, this is then causing them to pursue other weird things like wanting to leave the European Court of Human Rights. I'm sure we'll see some more weird things that they're going to obsess about, probably more of the woke stuff as well. And quite frankly, I think Starmer should just turn around and just say, why are you focusing on such a weird subject? And just start calling them calling them weird themselves. I think it's a good tactic. It's a good tactic, and maybe this is definitely something Rayner and Starmer and etc. should indeed start copying on that. So we'll see what happens there, but it'll be interesting to see. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.